Um, Good afternoon, everyone, colleagues, guests, friends. And let me welcome you to the 14th Presidential Roundtable discussion of the Academy of Science of South Africa. I must also, of course, greet our panelists whom I'm going to introduce shortly. So today's session is titled, aptly so, The Underground Crisis, How Governance Failures Fuel South Africa's Illegal Artisanal Mining Epidemic. It is a title that is deliberately confrontational because the crisis it names demands confrontation. It demands honest diagnosis, rigorous evidence, and the kind of frank exchange that occasions like this one that we are in now, are uniquely placed to provide. You would know and you would agree with me that South Africa sits atop some of the most mineral-rich geology on Earth. Our mining heritage is woven into the very foundation of the modern state. And yet beneath our feet, quite literally beneath our feet, a parallel economy has taken root, one that is unregulated, one that is unsafe, and in many instances controlled by organized criminal networks. Thousands of illegal miners, the so-called Zamas, operate in abandoned shafts, inactive mines, and across our landscapes, often at great personal risk and with profound consequences for communities, for the environment and the formal sector and the rule of law. This is not a new phenomenon, but it has reached epidemic proportions, hence this round table. And the central question we gather to examine today is not simply how this happened, but why we as a society allowed it to happen. What failures of governance, of regulation, of policy, and of institutional institutional will created the conditions in which illegal artisanal mining could thrive. On all those domains, what did we do? What has been our contribution that has made this sector to thrive the way it has? The Academy convenes these presidential roundtables to bring together the sharpest minds across disciplines to move beyond rhetoric and toward evidence-based action. Today, we have four specific objectives. Firstly, to diagnose root causes, to critically examine the policy, regulatory, and institutional failures that have enabled and sustained illegal artisanal mining in South Africa. Secondly, to explore formalization models. This is to assess whether and how a legal, regulated, and safe artisanal mining sector can be built, drawing on evidence from South Africa and comparable jurisdictions. Thirdly, we seek to develop an actionable set of recommendations, and these should be concrete proposals that government, industry, professional bodies, and civil society can implement. Lastly, we seek to foster collaborative action, simply because no single institution, no sector, no discipline can resolve this crisis alone. It will require coordination, it will require trust and shared commitment. And to guide this conversation this afternoon, we are privileged to have four panelists who bring complementary and formidable expertise. And to allow me to go through this, please allow me to go through their brief introductions. Four of colleagues here who are across the sector, drawn very specifically to make a very complementary or coordinated contribution to this big problem. I'll start off with Dr. Twala here, Ponto Twala, who is the director of the Wits Mining Institutes at the University of Witwatersrand. She is one of South Africa's foremost researchers on artisanal and small-scale mining. She's the second Black South African woman to obtain a doctorate in mining engineering. She brings over a decade of research, education, and community engagement to this subject. Her work spans the human realities of ASSAf, livelihood, safety, environmental impact, and the complex social dynamics of mining communities. She'll open our panel and ground our discussion in empirical reality. We also have Prof Hanri Mostert, who is a professor and the DST NRF Saatchi Research Chairholder for Mineral and Energy Resources Law in Africa at the University of Cape Town. Prof Mostert is an internationally renowned scholar of property and resources law, rated as such by the National Research Foundation. Her work spans the duties of the state, the rights of communities, and the accountability of institutions. She has advised the South African Law Commission, the World Bank, and provided expert support in international litigation. She will examine the legal and regulatory architecture and its failures. We also have Mr. Gary Lane, the president of the Southern African Institute of Mining and Metallurgy, and also the director of Vuuma Collaborations. He has over 30 years of experience across mining operations, project management, project development, and industry leadership in Africa and internationally. Mr. Lane brings a systems thinking perspective to these challenges. And as the president of SAIMM, he's actively shaping the skills and professional development pipeline of our mineral sector. He will interrogate the institutional and professional dimensions of this crisis. We also have Mr. Grant Michel, who is the head of the Junior and Emerging Miners Desk at the Minerals Council of South Africa. He's one of South Africa's most experienced mining policy specialists, with a career spanning more than 3 decades, from the Chamber of Mines to the Minerals and Energy Policy Center, to independent consultancy, and now to the Minerals Council. He was instrumental in crafting South Africa's national strategy for small-scale mining in the 1990s. He will bring the perspective of the junior and emerging mining sector and the unintended consequences of how we have responded to illegal mining thus far. So that is how we foreground the discussion that we are going to be having here. This is the panel that is going to assist us in understanding the nuances on this very, very, very hot topic in our country. And we hope that by the end of this roundtable, all of us would have gotten a chance to engage with the panelists, and also we will be in a position to understand better what is happening in that space. And without any further ado, may I allow each of the panelists to just give me a few opening remarks. I'll start off here with you, Dr. Ponto Twala. Just a few opening remarks for just no more than 3 minutes, your overview for now.
Thank you very much, Prof, and for the opportunity to contribute to this discussion on artisanal and small-scale mining. I do agree that this is a very important topic, considering the state of mining in South Africa, as well as the...
Dr. Twala, are you able to share with us your video? In other words, are we in a position to see you?
Yes, I can briefly do that, but my network has been unstable.
Okay.
So this is Dr. Twala. That's the face.
Just to be sure, this is the AI world we live in.
Yes, Prof. Okay. Okay, just to save my bandwidth. Yeah. So this topic, it's a topic that it's very close to my heart, because as a mining engineering graduate from WITS, I was first introduced to this topic, early in my career, having worked for Mintech, which is a state-owned enterprise, and within Mintech, while its core business, its mineral processing, it had a division called the Small Scale Mining and Beneficiation Division, which was mandated with supporting the sector. And through working at Mintech, I got exposure on the sector. And looking back, it has changed to, how it was understood to what we are seeing today. But I think what is important, and what most of us have been working, towards, is the formalization of the sector, which is something that we are going to get into in today's discussion. It is important to acknowledge the importance that this sector has, not only in South Africa, but on the continent, as well as globally. And maybe just to share some high-level statistics that are there to just give the audience a picture of how big the artisanal and small-scale mining sector is, beyond South Africa. So globally, it is estimated that there are more than 40 million people that are participating in the sector, that are making a living from artisanal and small-scale mining sector. And beyond that, there are more than 150 million people that are depending on the sector. And also beyond that, we are seeing the contribution of the sector to national economies, to socio-economic development, in some countries, looking, specifically at mineral outputs. Just some statistics. So 20% of the gold that is produced globally, it's produced by this sector. 20% of the diamond produced globally is produced by the sector. And we're also seeing significant, contribution in other minerals as well, if you're looking at, industrial and construction minerals. So there's definitely potential for this sector, and in the South African context, for it to play an increased role in local economic development. However, for it to do that, there's these challenges that we need to address as stakeholders, and Prof raised key questions that we need to answer as stakeholders, honestly answer as stakeholders in the mining sector. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion, looking forward to unpacking some of the challenges that we are seeing in the sector that as academia we are working towards addressing. Thank you, Prof. I think I'll pause here for now.
Yes, yeah, thanks very much for that, Ponja, for those opening remarks. Can I give the platform to you now, Gary? Just the 3-minute opening remarks on your side.
Great. Thank you very much, Prof. And really excited to be on this panel with all of you. From an SAIMM perspective, our role is stewardship of the end-to-end professional capability pipeline for the mining sector. It's in fact, I'm sitting today in the Mineral Council's buildings with all the heads of school as an example, and some of the mining companies where we're looking at addressing the capability gap that we're identifying in the industry. So I'll be talking a bit more about that. So from students through to industry leadership, we provide that platform, okay? So just from a personal perspective and where I add value, and I've been in the industry for 30 years, is I apply a systems thinking lens to very complex problems, simplifying complexity by understanding how all the individual components interact and how they collectively contribute to an overall systems performance, or in this case, underperformance. And we'll touch on that because I've done some thinking around this challenge. Government has taken a number of important steps to address illegal mining, particularly through coordinated enforcement operations, efforts to rehabilitate abandoned mines, and an increasing focus on organized criminal networks. There's also growing recognition of the need to formalize artisanal and small-scale mining. So in that context, the most significant issue I see is a governance system design failure, particularly in how the mining framework accommodates participation across the full spectrum of the sector. The current regulatory system is well developed for large-scale mining, but it is not designed to adequately accommodate artisanal and small-scale participation. This has created a structural gap, and from a systems perspective, if a system does not provide a viable entry point for artisanal miners, they are going to find an alternative system, and that's what's basically happened, and it's illegal mining. That is where we are seeing ourselves, where we have an emergent parallel mining economy operated outside of the formal governance structures. Obviously, a key driver of this is the socioeconomic challenges we face in Southern Africa. High levels of unemployment and limited access to economic opportunities mean that artisanal mining becomes a livelihood strategy for many people. So from a systems perspective, this is not an external problem, and it's part of the system that we have to design. And if the system does not provide structured, safe, and legal pathways for participation, it will continue to manifest in informal and unregulated ways. So importantly, this activity is not limited to legacy or abandoned large-scale mining. In many cases, it's actually happening independently. So for example, there are illegal mining operations happening along river systems and shallow ore bodies are not even within existing mining boundaries. This reinforces that the issue is broader than mine closure, and it is a system-wide gap in how participation is structured and governed. So if we step back and view mining as a full life cycle, from exploration, development, operations, and closure, we see a well-regulated system through most of its stages. However, at post-closure, the system often loses clear ownership. And at the same time, there are parallel entry points outside of this life cycle, particularly at surface mining, which is inadequately governed. This is further compounded by fragmented governance. You're going to find that there are multiple institutions that deal with, and government departments dealing with mineral resources, policing, environmental, water, home affairs because of the illegal immigrants. And no single point of end-to-end accountability. So if we had to identify one intervention, and I'll unpack it as we discuss in this panel, it would be the creation of a structured, formalized pathway for artisanal and small-scale mining, supported by appropriate standards, access to equipment, capability development in safety and environmental management. This would allow the system to absorb participation in a governable space, differentiated between the legitimate economic activity and criminal networks, and enable a more targeted, effective enforcement. Ultimately, this is not about compliance. It is about designing a mining system that's inclusive, governable, and sustainable across the full life cycle. So really looking forward to the conversations and questions. So back to you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gary, for that preamble to your contribution this morning. Maybe I should say this afternoon. If I can go to you, Prof Mostert, Hanri, just your opening remarks. Yeah, we are on mute, Prof Mostert.
7 years on and we still don't get it right. Thank you.
Yeah, yes.
I can simply say everything that Gary said. I agree. I agree completely. I have great respect for systems thinkers. And if I had to identify a single governance failure, the one at the heart of South Africa's illegal mining crisis, it would be this. We have designed a legal and economic system that no longer offers believable pathway to livelihood for many people. And then we respond punitively when they try to construct a livelihood outside of the system. So I see illegal mining is often framed as a failure of enforcement, but enforcement is just the stress crack. The deeper fracture lies in the design. Over the past decades, we've seen a profound shift. A mining industry that 30 years ago employed 2 million people directly now employs just 500,000. It's a fraction of that number. Thousands of mines have been abandoned or left economically residual, and we sit with very high levels of unemployment alongside deep reservoirs of mining know-how. So we have 3 elements here: capability and opportunity. And if they meet with frustrated chances to thrive, which is what unemployment does, people don't stop trying. They just reorganize themselves. And in this case, they've reorganized themselves underground, both literally and economically. And then we call that outcome criminality. But from a governance perspective, it's also a predictable response to exclusion. And now that doesn't mean that there isn't criminality. That's not what I'm saying. There clearly is, particularly in the form of organized networks of violence, exploitation. But when we think of illegal mining as criminal, we collapse very different realities into a single explanation. Syndicates, survivalist miners, former mine workers, trafficked labor, they are all treated as if they are part of one and the same problem, but they are not. And because they are not, a single primarily punitive response cannot work. And if we want to disrupt that system, we need to shift the underlying logic. The one change that would make the greatest difference is this: the state must make legality more viable than illegality. And at the moment, for many people, legality is distant, it's slow, it's exclusionary, and it's uncertain. Illegality, by contrast, is immediate, it's real, even if it is risky. And until that equation changes, enforcement will remain reactive and incomplete. What would it mean to change it? 4 points. It would mean taking seriously the responsibility for abandoned and residual mining sites, which currently functions as open invitations to informal re-entry. Secondly, it would mean creating credible, visible livelihood pathways in ways that people can actually see and trust. For instance, in rehabilitation work, in local production, in alternative economic activity. Thirdly, it would mean differentiating clearly between organized criminal networks and those operating out of survival and responding accordingly. And fourthly, it would mean grounding all of this in a constitutional commitment to dignity, because at its core, this is about how people secure the means to live. Illegal mining is therefore not just an enforcement problem, it's a signal. It's a signal about exclusion, about abandonment, about the limits of our current governance model. And if we respond only at the level of the signal, we will keep chasing the symptoms. If we address the design, we may begin to change the system.
Thank you very much for that, Hanri. Yeah, I think we are in for an interesting discussion here. Gary, can I come to you? Also, give your opening remarks. Sorry, I'm sorry, Grant. I'm going to Grant now. Sorry, Grant, please come in.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Prof. And thanks to my panelists. You mixed me up with Gary. We're actually sitting in the same. I think you've done the passage.
Yeah.
Okay, where do I start? I'd like to start by, I'm responsible in the Minerals Council for the Junior and Emerging Mining Desk, and that encompasses, in fact, half the Mineral Council membership now fall under the desk. It encompasses typically junior miners in South Africa, usually smaller producers, small to mid-tier producers, and the exploration sector. They are obviously very formalized. Many of them get overseas funding. Some of them are listed on stock exchanges, etc. So that's a completely different category, but it does fall under the sort of what we call the smaller end of the market. I'm being a bit pedantic, but I'd like to sort of separate out these different categories. We then have small-scale miners who are the formalized mining operations, typically family-run businesses. The Northern Cape has many small diamond producers falling under SADPO, who fit into that category. They are members of the Junior Mining Desk, incidentally, and also Espaza has these smaller operations who would typically be called small-scale miners. They formalize, they apply the law, they're compliant. We then have, excuse me, I've got the flu, so I'm sounding a bit croaky. We then have what I would define as artisanal miners. And artisanal miners historically are community-driven structures or community-driven folk who just trying to eke out a living. And historically, under apartheid, they were locked out the system. And therefore, there's a long, long tradition of artisanal mining in South Africa and a lot of transferred skills. Those are the group, I believe, who need to be formalized. And the pathway, as we described, a legal system which is doable for the smaller end of the market. And as Gary pointed out, we have a one-size-fits-all in our regulatory environment and in our policy. It was designed for and by large mining companies. It doesn't cater for the junior end of the market, and it certainly doesn't cater for the small end of the market. And a lot of our negotiations and deliberations with the regulator comes down to this. We would like to see a multi-tiered system which caters to all ends of the market. And then we go to the illegal miners, as I would call them, inverted commas, the Zamas. And they are, as you've mentioned, many of them driven by criminal syndicates. They're becoming a massive problem in the industry, infiltrating formal operations. We've seen mining companies where asset stripping, infrastructures being ripped out, not just stealing the minerals, but actually stealing the infrastructure. Very well organized, often very well armed. I believe that group needs to come out of the system. And perhaps I'm in variance with what Prof Mostert has said, but I honestly believe, and that's the strategy of the government. And the position of the Minerals Council is that we only support regulated legal mining. However, we do recognize that this informal sector exists, and we need to sort of try and regulate it. When I first got involved in the small-scale sector in the 90s, when I was working for the Minerals and Energy Policy Center. In fact, we were the first group to, we were the secretary to the drafting of the white paper, but we were the first group to start engaging artisanal miners in the Northern Cape. This is the first time I knew they existed. We had a process called the Kimberley Mining Forum, which was actually an amazing process. It comprised all the big companies, but it also involved the small-scale miners and the regulator. Government was on this committee. And the idea was to try and sort of start a process. And we did some formalization at that stage. But those were the only artisanal mining operations that existed. The Zamas didn't exist at that point. So this is a phenomenon that has grown in the last 20 years. And a lot of it is, and I'm sounding xenophobic, a lot of these are foreign nationals. Many of them are foreign nationals. And we don't know much about them. Are these ex-South African mine workers from Lesotho, or are they other groups? We don't know much about them. But they have grown substantially in the last 20 years or 10 years particularly, and they are overwhelming the artisanal miners. What is happening is that they are overwhelming and taking over the artisanal miners. And this is a very dangerous phenomenon. And that's why I've said, we feel very strongly that this group has got to be taken out of the equation because they're not adding any value and they don't want to formalize, in my view. And I know I'm sounding quite what's the word, reactionary, but this is the reality facing the industry. I think those are my opening remarks. I hope they're not too harsh, but
Yes.
from the industry.
Yeah, so this is sort of a no-holds-barred discussion, and I would like us to be as candid, as I said early on, as we can. Thanks, Grant, for those opening remarks. Can I just look back to you, Gary? You are known for applying systems thinking, and it was very evident in your opening remarks. And that is meant to break down complex, interconnected industry challenges into practical solutions. If one had to apply that lens to illegal artisanal mining, what are the critical nodes in the system, whether in governance, in skills pipeline, in professional oversight, or industry structure, where targeted intervention would have the greatest leverage in disrupting the conditions that allow illegal mining to persist?
All right. Yeah, Prof, that's a really, really good question. And, applying that system lens, I've really broken it down. And these may not be all the nodes. These are my high level nodes. And, my approach would be, trying to build and understand a whole system. You need to then engage and collaborate. But these are the ones that I've picked up. So the first is I've called it system entry. And it's what we've already spoken about a little bit here. And that is, there's no current regulatory design process around small-scale operators entering the industry. It's all, as Grant had mentioned, designed for the big mining houses, all right? So that's a big, big problem. I mean, and obviously because of the socioeconomic pressures, then individuals find alternative ways, and we know what the result is. The second is enforcement. Now, enforcement alone is not going to address any of it. That's just going to address illegal activities in mining and criminal networks, but it's critical for us to address that as well. The third is system coordination. Okay, now what I mean there is we've got multiple government departments looking after different elements. So you've got environmental, you've got safety, you've got water, you've got mining licenses. We've got to get that whole fragmented system working together to be effective. We also need a closure and post-closure management process. All right, we've got legacy sites that are becoming re-entry points for illegal miners. So that also needs to be fixed. And then beyond even the current mining rights, we've actually got parallel sort of surface level access where people are mining surface outcrops that are also artisanal and are also illegal. So we need to do, and then the last and sixth point, which is very much where SAIMM plays a role, and that is around capability enablement. So it's including appropriate training around safety, environmental, and even access to equipment to be able to effectively, and that's where Prof Mostert spoke about, it's got to be better to be working legally than illegally. So if you gave them access to stuff to help them be successful, they will want to adopt the legal system and process around that. So those sort of the high level nodes that I've sort of identified that need to work together to really get this to work properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Gary. Can I come back to you here, Prof Mostert? Even you've been working at this for some time, and your scholarship emphasizes the state's duty to achieve better living standards while ensuring responsible individual autonomy. And we have engaged directly with the South African Law Commission and World Bank on property and resource law matters. In your assessment, which specific provisions or silences in South Africa's current mineral and property law framework have most enabled illegal artisanal mining to flourish? And what would a legally robust formalization pathway look like that respects both state authority and community rights, which you've emphasized on in your preamble?
Prof, you're giving me only 5 minutes for all of that. I'm going to try not to do law talk, legal talk.
If you could summarize it for us,
yes.
what could be the nubs?
I would summarize it in 3 enabling features. 2 silences and structural tension. And the first is kind of a regulatory silence around artisanal and small-scale mining. It has been mentioned already. So as have been said, our primary mining legislation is basically designed for large-scale capital-intensive operations. It doesn't meaningfully accommodate low capital, labor-intensive, survivalist, or residual mining activities. And there has been attempts more recently, since 2022, at changing this with small-scale licenses granted in some sectors. But I'd venture to say that the paradigm is still very much focused on large-scale operations. And if there is no significant shift here, an entire category of economic activity, which clearly exists, is left without a lawful entry point. And that is not a marginal gap, it's a structural exclusion. The second silence is the legal and practical failure around mine closure and post-closure governance, and that has also been mentioned. Legally, there is regulation for closure, but we have thousands of abandoned mines or economically residual mining sites. It's been called legacy sites. And in practice, we see incomplete rehabilitation or weak enforcement of closure obligations and or a lack of ongoing governance of these spaces. But those sites, they retain value. They retain access points, and they retain communities with knowledge of how to extract from them. So the law creates a formal endpoint, closure, but it does not effectively govern what happens after closure. And that creates a vacuum. And you'll know that vacuums beg to be filled. And the third is a deeper structural tension in our property and resource framework. And in terms of the law, the state holds mineral resources as custodian for the people. That is a powerful and important constitutional arrangement. But in practice, that custodianship is exercised through highly centralized, administratively demanding licensing systems. They are not accessible to those operating at the margins. So we have a system that asserts control over access to resources, but it's still very much exclusionary in offering realistic pathways for many people to exercise that access lawfully. And that is where illegality begins to take root, not outside of the system. It's within its exclusions. So if we accept that diagnosis, what would a legally robust pathway look like? I think the key point is this. Formalization by itself cannot simply mean extending the current system downward. That won't work. It has to be designed differently from the ground up. And I think there are 4 elements that one should highlight. The first is legal recognition and differentiation. The law must explicitly recognize artisanal and small-scale mining as a legitimate category, not as a tag-on to the licensing design that was made for large-scale operations. And within that, it must differentiate between survivalist or livelihood mining or small-scale entrepreneurial activity and organized criminal operations. And if there's no differentiation like that, the regulation will either be too weak for the serious risks, or it's going to be too rigid for those operating at the margins. The second point is that there must be a genuinely accessible entry point. This means simplified, decentralized, and staged licensing, not a binary system of full compliance or illegality. And people must be able to enter legality incrementally with obligations that scale over time, especially in relation to safety and environmental standards. The third point, I think, is integration with land, community, and local governance. Mining law cannot operate isolated from that social context. Local communities must have a role in monitoring, participating, and benefit sharing. Otherwise, formalization will remain something imposed from above rather than something that is lived and sustained. And the fourth point, and I think this is critical, is formalization must be linked to viable livelihoods. If legality doesn't offer a safer, more stable, more rewarding alternative, it won't be taken up. So the legal framework must connect to rehabilitation work, alternative local economic activity, access to markets, and importantly, traceable supply chains. Otherwise, we are not formalizing the sector, we are just relabeling exclusion. So to summarize, illegal mining flourishes because the law doesn't sufficiently recognize and govern the reality that exists. A robust pathway is not just about compliance. It's about designing a system in which legality becomes possible, it becomes credible, and it becomes worth choosing.
Okay, no, thank you very much for those words. I think you've summarized something that is very complicated in a short space of time there, Prof Mostert. I want to come back to you, Ponto. We've heard now the distinction between illegal and perhaps what could be formalized miners. Your research focuses on artisanal and small-scale mining, the so-called ASM communities, including their livelihoods and their social dynamics. If I may ask, from your fieldwork and engagement with these communities, how do you distinguish in both policy design and practical implementation between survivalist miners driven by poverty and necessity, which we heard from Prof Mostert, and those embedded in organized criminal syndicates, which also was raised by Grant at some point? And does that distinction meaningfully change what interventions are likely to work from your experience?
Thank you, Prof, for this question. And, colleagues have touched on it in their responses. And I think, at the base, what is critical is recognizing that the artisanal and small-scale mining sector is different from large-scale mining. And also, within the umbrella of ASM, and Grant laid the foundation in terms of how we are defining
Are we losing Ponto?
artisanal mining versus mining. Yes, Prof?
No, I thought that we were losing you. Please continue.
Okay. Yes. So I was saying, Prof, at the base, what is coming out, and I agree with panelists, is understanding that this is a unique sector, understanding that whatever intervention that is implemented to support, to formalize, to legalize the sector needs to take into account the characteristics of the sector, because otherwise it's not going to work. The top-down approach is not going to work. So again, within the ASM sector, rightfully identified, there is a spectrum of activities that needs to be, counted for. So at a broad level, Prof, we have survivalist, activities or poverty-driven activities. And, these are people that enter the sector because of the need for livelihoods, the need to put, bread on the table. And, it can be young people in, Nongoma. It can be, women in Umtata who are mining clay. It can't be even old people, because from the research that we have done, we've established that participation is across different ages. I remember in one study that we did in Kimberley, where they're mining diamonds, the oldest miner on site was 82 years old. So you do get, participation of old people in the sector. And, as noted, this group of people are driven into the sector due to the socioeconomic challenges that we have in the country: high unemployment rate, high poverty, limited economic opportunities. The state of the mining sector, we spoke about retrenchments, historical legacies, of mining around, poor mine closure, which is another governance failure, which has been noted. But really, the overarching motivation or driver is, for them to make a livelihood, to make a living out of this and support their families. And of course, on the other end, we have activities that are conducted by or associated with criminal syndicates. And really the motivation there is, they want to get rich. So they see it as a get rich quick scheme. And of course, from research that has been conducted, they're associated with other criminal activities. There's been reports of human trafficking, forced labor, and, different levels of, violence that affect those that are genuinely participating in the sector, and as well as, communities where these activities take place. So now, based on this, motivations, a suite of interventions will be, required, taking into account where these activities are taking place, taking into account the links with, criminal syndicates, the willingness to formalize. When you talk to those that are genuinely participating in the sector, for livelihood, they want to operate within the legal framework. They want to have mining permits. The bottlenecks remains the MPRDA and, current requirements and, provisions. For example, the MPRDA requires them to lodge an application using an online system. That's a barrier, on its own. As part of the applications, you need to put aside, financial provision for rehabilitation. You need to bring in environmental, specialists. So there's all of these, barriers that are beyond their means. Hence they find themselves, operating outside of the legal framework. And also there is that willingness, to contribute to the economy. And, some are contributing to the economy through, employment. You find that they are employing one or two people within the community. And also, if you look at the value chain, we're not only talking about, mining. They participate in other stages of the value chain. They process the minerals that they mine. Take, for example, those that are mining sandstone, for example, those that are mining clay, they go as far as producing bricks, as far as selling these bricks and really creating economies in areas that they operate. So really understanding these dynamics, motivations, where these activities are taking place, do they want to formalize or not? We cannot have a blanket, approach. And so we need to look at, different strategies, to make sure that we support, those that are genuinely mining and want to be part of the mining industry, but also, curbing, illegal, mining and the, criminal, syndicates. So I think, looking at the interventions currently in the sector, they've been, conflicting, in that on one end, you hear government talking about supporting, ASSAf, and then on the other end, there is Operations Vala Umgodi. And Operations Vala Umgodi, would clamp down on all the activities, including the activities of those that are, genuinely, mining for, a livelihood. So I think we need to, get to a point where government takes, position on what it supports and what it does not support. And this must actually flow into the interventions that are critical to support, the formalization of the sector, because, currently these have been, conflicting.
Okay, thanks for that very elaborate response to that fundamental question. Thanks for that, and also based on your experience there, Ponto. Before I let the audience participate as well through raising their questions, and there have been a few even on the chat questions, let me come back to you, Grant. And my question to you is simply this. You are directly involved in developing South Africa's national strategy for small-scale mining. This was in the late 90s. And you've tracked the sector's evolution over the years, almost 2 decades now. In your view, what is the single most significant policy commitment made during that period that was never implemented? And how has that failure of follow-through contributed to the illegal artisanal mining crisis that we see today? If you could be more specific.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. It's an interesting question. I'm going to talk from the historical perspective and, my experiences with it. The first framework came out in the 90s, late 90s, and the framework's fine. It talks about the obvious things you've got to do. You've got to register a company. You've got to apply for a right. You've got to comply with the legislation. You've got to try and raise finance. So the policies, okay, but what they're basically trying to say, and what the policy is saying, is that, we need to be more lenient with new entrants and with artisanal miners and not apply the same rules and regulations that we do to Anglo-American, for example. So it was trying to provide a framework which would enable an artisanal miner to move to a formalized small-scale mining operation. There were a couple of processes I was involved in enabling that. The first was there was a national steering committee set up at Mintech, and that comprised service providers like finance organizations. We had engineers, geologists, various industry professionals, and I happened to sit on this committee I was at the Minerals and Energy Policy Center at the time. And we tried over a period of a few years to identify projects in South Africa. Northern Cape was one, the diamond producers. There was a coal project in Osaswini and KZN. Trying to formalize these operations, some of which had been operating for a long time. And the idea was to go out, look at the geology, look at possible engineering models, come up with a business plan. And we did that on a number of projects. The failure was that it was never implemented properly because we didn't have project managers on the ground. At the time, the DMPR, it was a DMRE then, allocated a few staff members in a part-time capacity, in other words, in addition to their ordinary jobs. And they simply didn't have the time to be on the ground all the time. So the first policy failure to me was that if you're going to try and formalize an operation, you've got to have a project manager. And that is a resource. So the comment that I'd like to make is that you require a lot of resources if you're going to do this properly. It takes a lot of resources, and we simply don't have them at the moment. We either have to create another structure, which is funded with project managers to do this. The DMPR doesn't have the staff to do this at the moment. They've got a small-scale mining directorate, but they simply don't have the staff to go out and manage this. So that was my point number one. We need to put resources into some kind of a structure to formalize. The second process that I was involved was I was the chair of the small-scale mining technical reference group at the MQA, and we developed qualifications for artisanal miners. We developed over a period of about 8 years, 2 national qualifications. And the idea was to write, in those days it was unit standards, the system's changed, but to write unit standards which were very simple, simple geology, basic engineering, basic legal compliance, write these standards which could then be applied to a small-scale mining operation. And then a small-scale miner or artisanal miner who went through the process could then have a formal qualification. That was the intention. Now, Mintech was tasked with doing the training, the skills development. Okay, why did it fail? Well, the first point of failure was that the National Qualifications Framework requires ABET, a certain level of ABET, to actually get into the qualification. The artisanal miners, many of them have very little education. Many of them were, like you take a 50-year-old artisanal miner who's working all day, they don't want to go to ABET classes at night. It's as simple as that. So eventually the through the recruitment process, the people who came into for the training and the skills development weren't operating artisanal miners. They were people who had the requisite qualifications to go into the system. So there was a mismatch. Interestingly, Mintec did a survey afterwards on their graduates from the program. Very few of them had gone into artisanal mining, but they did say that they'd gained a lot of skills in the process, which they'd applied in other sectors of the economy. So it wasn't, I wouldn't say it's a waste of time, but it didn't reach the target audience. So what we need to look at in terms of skills development is some kind of very hands-on program which doesn't require ABIT. I don't know how we're going to do that. I mean, it's a challenge because we do have this framework, but we need something which is much more practical in order to formalize. So those were two of my experiences. I also wanted to mention something else, just as a matter of interest, because we talked about the rise of illegal mining and the one-size-fits-all regulatory environment. We do a lot of research. I mean, Minerals Council is research-driven. Everything is evidence-based because if you want to interact with the regulator, you've got to have evidence. You can't go there with just an idea. In 2019, we did a major survey into the junior sector. Again, like small-scale mining, not a lot was known about it in South Africa because the whole emphasis historically on this industry is on majors. You look at the last century, it was 7 majors ran the industry. And of course, now we're diversifying much, much more. In 2019, the key challenge that the juniors had was with the regulatory environment and compliance. And they just said, from 2 points of view, number one size does not fit all, that we need a dispensation which talks more to our sector. And number 2, the implementation of the regulations by the regulator. Fortunately now we're moving towards a mining cadastre, which is going to make application much easier, but we're quite a long way off getting that cadastre. So those were the 2 key challenges. The second challenge was finance. In other words, trying to raise finance, and the financial markets in South Africa are very difficult to raise for small or artisanal, small-scale mining or junior mining. We redid the survey with the same researcher. Incidentally, he got his PhD in the interim. His PhD was based on this research. He redid the survey in 2019. The biggest challenge, number 1, was regulations. Guess what the second biggest challenge was? Illegal mining and Zamas. That was the second, and finance came third. So in the intervening years, in the last 6 years, we can see what an exponential increase there's been in illegal mining activity. So that I just thought I'd put that on the table. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Grant. I think everything is starting to tie in very, very, very nicely, and there's convergence in what the panelists are sharing with us here in terms of the loopholes in our system and some of the strengths, of course, that might exist. At this point, I would like to allow the audience to weigh in as well with their questions and their comments, contributions to this discussion. But I'll start off with some of the questions that have already been posted on this chat. There's one from Goodnose Mudimu. I think Goodnose might still be here. The question is, start off with the sentence there. Thank you for convening this timely discussion. My question to panelists, are there structured efforts to get most of the mines currently in care and maintenance into production? Is there a program by government to offload some of these projects that may generally be less commercially viable to big players and hand them over to small-scale miners? These questions are partially informed by the MPRDA, which is, of course, empowerment objective, which hinges on empowerment objectives and optimal mining of mineral resources. So this question, can I direct this one firstly to you, Hanri?
I think I think this is a question that needs to go to the Minerals Council.
Okay, so that's fine then. If so, let's take it to Grant. Come in. It's fine. Come in.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just trying to think how to respond to it. Look, these proposals are put forward. We've, particularly on the junior mining side, we feel that this is the junior mining desk. I can't talk for the rest of the Minerals Council, but we feel that non-core assets of majors could be useful for junior miners to mine. As far as artisanal mining goes and these mines that are on care and maintenance, this is just my perspective, and I don't have a mandate from the Minerals Council on this. But, the reality is that artisanal mining is for small deposits. It's manageable for an artisanal miner to, particularly at a surface level. If you want to go underground, you're in a whole different game. There's massive regulations, health and safety, environment, etc., etc. So personally, I don't think underground mines are suitable for artisanal miners at all. Surface mines, you've probably got a better opportunity and a better chance. So that's something that possibly could be looked at. You could probably form cooperatives. I don't know. I know that there have been attempts to do this. But I think that it's just an idea at the moment. But I think we got to stick to the principle that small deposit for small operators, big deposits for big operators. I don't know if that's answered the question.
Okay, no, thanks. Are you covered on that one? Good nose, are you still here? You had the answer? Yeah, I would assume they got that, but it's very clear from how you responded to that, Grant. Thank you very much. Can I see if there are any hands? You'll guide me here, Tebogo, from the audience before I read
So
the rest
far,
of them.
there are no hands, Prof. We can continue with
Okay.
the
All right.
questions that are captured, but I'll be
So
on the lookout. Yes.
Yes, please indicate to me when you see questions also on the or from the audience or posted on the chat. But there's another question here from Michael McLagan. It's a multi-pronged question, of course, with its own preface. Illegal mining networks are well established. Zamas form a prominent part, but are only one component. You have complicit buyers and businesses purchasing illicit gold and high-level kingpins involved in transport and sale of on international markets. A lawful artisanal mining regime is definitely a necessary step, but vested interests will not take kindly to lawful artisanal miners eating into their market share. Furthermore, the Zamas, essentially the foot soldiers of illegal mining syndicates, count among their number some of the most violent criminals in Southern Africa, often armed with military-grade weapons stolen or obtained from the Lesotho military or SAPS. They are likely to exert criminal control over the market despite any formalization of artisanal mining. Added to this is the SADPMR. SADPMR appears to be asleep at the wheel when it comes to due diligence among gold companies and buyers. Where do we start? Do we formalize artisanal mining, take down the high-level syndicates, or fix the SADPMR, or all at once? So how do we do this? Who among the panel would like to take this one instead of me choosing who to take it? Who would like to come in first? It's a multi-pronged question, of course, but it can go either way. So who can take that one first from the panel?
I think if we think about it systemically, it would be interesting to have a conversation with Gary around this. But from what I've heard from the researchers that work with the tiers of criminality when it comes to the mining sector, the gold sector specifically, this is not going to go away unless the very top, the head of the snake, is cut off. And as far as I understand, and I'm talking on, this is not my own research, this is what I've heard from other colleagues. As far as I understand, getting to the very top is incredibly difficult because they are protected by four layers that are interrelated but kind of insulated from one another. So what we do here on the ground, closing the mines properly, putting post-closure governance in place, creating opportunities that can go some of the way. But as Michael is mentioning, if you don't take the substance, or it's not the substance, if you don't take the reward system away, then the desire to feed into it is going to remain. Maybe Gary, you want to add something to that.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Hanri, for that.
I'm happy to add. I'm happy to add to it as well. And I agree with Prof Mostert. I mean, the problem is legacy. Legacy is always very strong, and unfortunately, there is a system that's been built, a multi-level system that is actually built and is thriving on illegal mining, which is right through the value chain. So, the reality is it's going to get stronger and stronger the longer we leave it. So we basically got to sit and we've got to sort out a system for artisanal mining that is workable in all the components. But in parallel, we've got to start undoing the legacy system that exists, which is an illegal network of illegal mining. And it's right through to the buyers of the product and the exporting. So you have to start putting in the right system and incentives and dismantle the illegal system, basically.
Yeah, no, but come in, Hanri.
Yes, I would add to that. There are, as I understand, there are from geologists, there are ways, for instance, gold has a fingerprint. So there are ways to identify from which mine a particular nugget of gold is coming. And having a system in place where for instance, gold, which is very much illegally mined in South Africa, where that can be identified as sellable or not sellable based on the mine where it comes from, and whether that was a legally operating mine or not might be. But you need international buy-in for that as well, because our buyers are not in South Africa, the buyers are abroad. So you need this needs to be a global initiative as well.
Thanks, Hanri, for that. Any of the other panel who want to weigh in on this?
Just my comment. Well, first of all, the Minerals Council, we have our head of legal is involved with the police services. They coordinate on this, and so it's slightly outside of my area. But going back to that research that we recently done on the junior miners, we interviewed 12 CEOs, and when they talked about illegal mining and Zamas, they said we don't even bother to go to the police services because they are ineffective in regulating this. So we're on our own. We're literally on our own. And that's a very scary place to be. And as you know, mines are isolated, often they're in rural areas. So there's very little support. So we would need a much more, maybe almost a specialist unit to manage this, and it would have to be well resourced if you're gonna tackle it. That would be my comment.
Okay, but thanks, Grant, for that. Ponto, do you want to weigh in on this? It's a very broad question indeed.
It is a very broad question, but difficult, to answer, because on our side, the focus has been on, the other group of miners, but obviously there are those, connections that we have established, particularly when it comes to trading, where they are selling the minerals. And just taking from the information that Grant shared around, the support system that was established post 1998 after the minerals and mining policy. So we had these number of interventions, the National Steering Committee being one of them, established, and it was really to, support the sector, obviously recognizing that if we want to transform the sector, it has to be more than legalization. So you need to provide technical assistance, financial, marketing, channels as well, for example. And a lot of these, interventions, if you look at the developmental trajectory of the sector, they were disbanded around 2006, 2007, and the sector was left with no support. And this created that vacuum, and it was an avenue where miners found themselves looking for support elsewhere, and these sponsors then came into the sector, and they've created this dependencies in the sector, and that's why it's difficult for current interventions to have impact, because they have this close relationship that they have created. Just giving an example of the formalization intervention in Kimberley, where you had a Kappa releasing about 400 hectares of their land. DMRE came in. There was support from the Premier's office, and they created an umbrella cooperative under which the miners fell under, and then they were granted 2 mining permits. And now, because they were working within the legal framework, they could sell their diamonds through the formal channels. But because of the relationship that the miners had with the black market, even though the miners knew that if I sell my diamonds through the formal the tender system, I'm going to get more money.
We keep on losing Dr. Twala there. Yeah, she did mention that she was struggling with her connectivity. Right. Maybe whilst you are waiting for Dr. Twala to get back, there is a comment also on the chat box from Susan Winkler. It's broadly a comment, but there's a question also embedded in that broad comment. Susan is saying, she's saying, if the government realized the value of large-scale formal mining, especially on the gold mines, and the employment and fiscal contribution therefrom, and it was made easier for large-scale formal mining investment to continue, would that not relieve some of the economic stagnation and create employment for at least a group of the informal miners to once more be formally employed? It is known that investment in exploration and mining in South Africa has been made very difficult for formal mining, and to mine deep level gold mines, the formal large-scale miners are needed in the economy. Support for artisanal mining in line with recommendations here are also sorely needed. But the idea that artisanal miners can safely mine at extreme depths without sophisticated technology is not possible. Both formal, intermediate, and artisanal mining needs to be acknowledged and encouraged to get our economy going again. That in itself should bring about some relief to the poverty that drives the informal mining problem. I think this is very much in line with what has been shared by almost all the panelists here, that there is an element of legitimacy, if for the lack of a better word, in artisanal mining, particularly insofar as it seeks to plug the gap or the hole of poverty. because in most instances it seems to be driven by poverty. But there is also an element of criminality, outright criminality, as it was shared by colleagues here, by the panelists early on. So this is very much a comment at this stage, but I'm not sure if any of the panelists would like to weigh in on this one. Gary? Sorry, Grant, sorry.
Yeah, well, this is just a general concept or idea. You know, I've always thought that it would be very good for a large company to adopt a small-scale mine or adopt an artisanal mine in their vicinity, because they've got all the technological skills. They could have an ore supply agreement between an artisanal miner who's working in the region on the same commodity and provide the support. And I think we would get a lot further with that sort of structure than our attempts so far. You know, I have proposed that, you know, I think it's an idea worth considering, even using the social and labor plan as it exists, seeing this as enterprise development. You know, the current social and labor plan, enterprise development is seen as developing, you know, small businesses, but it's not aligned to mining. So why couldn't we use that enterprise development aspect of the social and labor plan and say, let's develop an artisanal mine into a small-scale mine? And I think we would get a lot more traction if we went that route.
Thank you for that suggestion, Grant. We have quite a few other questions on the chat box. Maybe let's go straight to those, colleagues. There's one from Videt Bester, and in fact, it's a multi-pronged question as well. They say the formalization of artisanal small-scale mining has failed in many instances across Southern Africa for multiple reasons, including a lack of adequate support and capacity building. In this context, firstly, what lessons can we draw from other countries in sub-Saharan Africa? That's the first question. What concrete support mechanisms will accompany formalization beyond licensing and compliance requirements? Thirdly, who will be responsible for delivering capacity building to artisanal miners, and how will this be funded and sustained? So those are the three questions, somehow interrelated, but each on its own would deserve a response. So the first one, what lessons can we draw from other countries in sub-Saharan Africa, which I think is very, very important. Our discussions so far have centered around our country. But what lessons can we learn from other countries?
I'm happy to take a stab at it.
Yes,
Yeah, so in preparation, I actually did a bit of research. I mean, there are artisanal mining frameworks in place in quite a few countries globally. Ghana, Peru, Tanzania have all recognized artisanal mining and created structured pathways. Interestingly, none of them have got it right. When I say right, in some instances it hasn't eliminated illegal mining, and it has all of its individual challenges. So I think one of the first things to do would be to do some proper research to understand what elements of it has worked, so we can leverage what's worked and learn and build on it. But it's got to be structured, and you'll see that every one of those unique jurisdictions has got some unique challenges they never resolved. But there are great case studies we can look at. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gary, for that. I think that's very, very important for us to learn from those who have walked this path ahead of us and see how far it led before we walk into it ourselves. But if I may ask, can we say that it's only licensing and compliance requirements that we could offer as support mechanisms to formalization? Are those the only two support mechanisms, or there could be other concrete support mechanisms beyond the two? That's the second question.
I might add. I have some thoughts about question B, but I'm going to do maybe something a little bit wild. In the group of people who are listening, I have noticed many names of students and current students and former students of the Mineral and Energy Resources Law Master's Program at
Okay.
And this question is one of the questions that get asked to them every year. And they are assigned to do the research that Gary says we need. So would you allow me to just invite the students who have done this research just to drop into the chat what they have
Okay.
learned from the jurisdictions that they have studied, because they have studied a lot of African jurisdictions. And maybe we can harvest some of that information.
Okay, that would be great. Please
Yeah.
do that. By all means, we'd be happy to do so. Thanks for that observation.
And
Yeah.
then just to say that what concrete support mechanisms will support formalization? As Gary has said, we have examples of great, very sophisticated legislative frameworks around artisanal small-scale mining. The DRC is a very good case in point. But even where sophisticated legislation exists, the implementation thereof remains uneven, and a lot of the activity remains outside of a formal system. So I also went and thought a little bit about not looking specifically at examples of in the mining sector, but where formalization has worked better in other sectors. And there are two that I want to mention. And I'll say a little bit more about it if you ask me for more questions. But the Abilobi app, I'm not sure whether people here are aware of it, but the Abilobi app has done phenomenal things to fishery governance in South Africa, because it enabled small-scale fishers to get straight to restaurants and supermarkets. And at the same time, it has enabled small-scale fishers to contribute to the governance, contribute to the data gathering, and so on. So it has harnessed this very interesting phenomenon that we see in Africa, which is the ability to leapfrog over innovation. So I think if we cast our net a little bit wider and look at other industries, we might actually get lessons around support mechanisms.
That's a very good point.
The other one is waste picking, but I'll say something about that maybe a little bit later.
The waste picking, yeah. I have a sense of where that one is going, particularly the waste picking one, yeah. Okay, but thank you very much for this, Hanri. On that one, B, is there anyone maybe in the panel who wants to add to what Prof Mostert has shared?
Let's see if anybody has responded to the invitation.
Is it? Yeah. But then there is another question whilst Hanri is checking the responses to the invitation. Who will be responsible for delivering capacity building to artisanal miners, and how will this be funded and sustained? I think that's a very, very pertinent question to what we're discussing. If we say that we want to formalize it, there would need to be capacity building. Is that the responsibility of government, or that's the responsibility of the private sector? And how could it be managed? Gary, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, maybe let me maybe just touch on it and granted mention it. You know, there's got to be some kind of financial incentive for the funding. I mean, the private sector can't always be funding stuff potentially that needs to be funded by government. But if you align some of the legislation and, for example, supplier enterprise development that is currently going to BBBE, if that gets aligned with the drive for artisanal mining, it will start attracting money. So even skills development, if you start aligning the overall strategy of what's required, you're going to start attracting the money into that. So I think there are pathways that can be looked at if you look at the overall requirements around that funding.
Is it? Okay, no, thanks for that, Gary. By the way, I'm told, Grant, I'll let you in now, that Prof Twala will be joining. She's struggling with the connectivity. I think she did mention before we started. But Gary, on this one, come in.
Yeah, Grant.
Sorry, Grant. Grant, sorry.
I just as a comment, you know, the National Skills Framework, I mean, employers pay a percentage of their profits into a levy for skills development, but as I mentioned, it's not always appropriate for the artisanal mining sector because of the requirements of ABET. So one would have to look for other avenues, what other structure would work to support that. And I just go back to my original comment of using the enterprise development component of the SLP would be a very good vehicle, and I'm sure that a lot of mining companies would be happy to do that, and I think it would be a practical way of actually supporting this sector. And then a second point, I just wanted to just sort of go back a comment or two about the comments on what practical interventions. I mean, that's one. I just wanted to mention the Mintek Small Scale Mining Division has done some excellent work at practical interventions. For example, the artisanal gold miners are using mercury to extract gold, which is highly dangerous. I mean, it's used in other parts of Africa. It's highly dangerous, it's highly toxic, obviously, to the person and to the environment. And they developed a mechanism by using household chemicals, a very cheap little, can I call it a machine or an extractor, whereby they could use this instead of using mercury. And they funded the equipment, and they did the training across the country in various gold sectors with quite a lot of success. And that's just one example, and I think there are others. But that's the type of intervention you want, something at a very practical, hands-on level. Thank you.
But thanks for that example, Grant. Mary,
Can I come in, Prof?
yeah, please come in.
Yes.
Yeah, are you back, Poncho? Yeah, thanks.
Yes, I'm back. Yes, I'm
Sure.
back, Prof. Just in terms of capacity building and skills development,
Yes.
I think it should be a collaborative effort. But in terms of leading organizations or institutions, I mean, as it currently stands, you have the Mining Qualifications Authority, MQA, that continue to fund training in the sector, working alongside Mintech. And the information that I have is they are still delivering this training to the sector. But what I also want to put on the table is, when we look at capacity building, program for the sector, it needs to be, beyond the miners. Yes, there are skills gaps, amongst the miners, but we also need to look at, a program for stakeholders that interface with the sector. Just give you an example of, government. Give an example of the parliamentary, committee, for example, that is responsible for, the policy development, design, because it needs to be from an informed, perspective. And through the work that we've done, we've established that, there's also these knowledge gaps, amongst, stakeholders that are, responsible for the sector, or, are in a position to make certain decisions about the sector. So my submission is that training program needs to be, inclusive, yes, to address the skills gaps amongst the miners, but also look at, other stakeholders. Media, for example, has played a role in how, the sector is viewed and, treated. And that's why we have this blanket approach. So I think education is needed by the various, stakeholders that interface with the sector.
No, great. Thank you very much for that, Poncho. Very clearly articulated indeed. There is a comment from Mary, Prof. Scholes. She says, thank you for the webinar. I've heard the same information for the last 10 years, and I think we are making no progress. I think we have the wrong actors in this debate. I would assume that this is the debate that she's talking about. We don't need academics and more systems analysis or systems analysts. We need buy-in from government and industry and miners. Do you agree with this assertion?
Can I maybe comment?
Yeah, please come in.
I'm fully aligned. I mean, I think, if you think about it, the customer is the artisanal miner. Okay, we need to speak to the customer as one part. So we definitely need to get artisanal miners onto a webinar panel discussion. That would be my comment.
So I agree with that as well, that you'd have to get all stakeholders in the same room. It's just that in most instances, it becomes really, really difficult. So what it means is at some point, as we go forward with the deliberations, we must think of involving people from the government, from industry, from the miners as well, as you put it, the actual customers, the people that are at the center of this discussion. It's something that we will do going forward, but it's very, very important that we first and foremost make sure that the understanding is the same. We've been talking about this problem for many years, but I found it to be evolving over time and taking different shapes as it evolves. And I think it's important to get people who are at the heart of it, who work very closely with the problem, and give us the lay of the land as to where things are, so that when we apply our thinking, we apply it from the vantage point of better understanding. So in a way, I fully agree with complementing the set of participants, but the panel or the panelists that we had secured for this one, I think is still very, very, very ideal, just to allow us, all the members of the audience, to understand. I mean, even some of us in the academic space have a poor understanding of what the problem is in that space. We see what's happening on a daily basis. We see the damage it's causing to our communities on a daily basis. But what is it at the heart of this problem? And I think it's important that we understand that. Coming with the solutions, then, of course, it has to be government that participates in it, not government alone. It has to be the private sector that participates in this. And of course, there has to be full participation from the miners themselves. So I'm saying that all the steps or the stages that we put together as we seek to understand and solve the problem have their place in the bigger equation of our solution. So this would be just my response. I'm not sure whether...
Can I come in?
Yeah, please, Grant, come in.
Look, I think you need both, you need academic research in order to create a policy framework. I mean, the last reiteration of the artisanal and small-scale mining policy framework was based on research. And we mentioned before, looking at other countries, the team went to 3 countries, Ghana being one of them, in order to come up with a policy framework. So I think you need both. But at the same time, you need to talk to people on the ground. And there is a small-scale mining, artisanal mining association. In fact, I was in a panel 2 years ago, and they were represented it was panels at Mintech, who represent, the artisanal miners. And I think you need to bring these 2 groups together. So my response to that is that we need both, and research often, like the research from Poncho at Wits, engages artisanal miners. That's part of their job, is to go out there and research and find out what's going on. It's on the ground. So yeah, and just to summarize, you need both. Thank you.
If I may ask, from my side, and again, coming from that point of limited knowledge of what's happening in the space, with all the work that has happened, creating policies and, of course, coming up with evidence-based solutions on paper at least, what is the appetite for, say, government? I'll start from there, to take those suggestions so far. Who can assist me with this? What has been the appetite? How much of what has been researched and put into policy on this subject has been actually translated to action, meaningful action?
I think if I can respond, I think Wits School of Mines done a lot of work on that. I mean, inputs into that policy framework, and various other actors. have also made inputs into that policy framework. So it's like any policy, the government puts it out there and asks for responses, and that's how eventually you craft something that's probably workable. But that's my answer, the short answer.
So there has been some uptake
Yeah.
of the suggestions made from the academic sector.
Yes. Can I come in, Prof?
Yes, please come in, Ponzo, and then I'll also ask Hanri to come in there from the academic point, and then Gary, you can weigh in as well. Ponzo?
I think generally engagement with government on societal issues is difficult, and we have been doing this work in the sector for quite some time, and I would say there has been improvement in terms of our engagement specifically with DMPR. Because in the beginning it would be very difficult to even secure a meeting with them to make submission or just share the research that we are doing as the university. But over the years, this has changed, and we participated in the development of the policy. We also made submissions with the current MPRDA amendments. So overall, there has been improvements, and most of these challenges that we highlighted today and have been highlighting, you'd see that they are captured in the policy, acknowledging that MPRDA has shortcomings, specifically Section 27, of the MPRDA. Obviously, things have been, slow in terms of moving from the policy, which was published in 2022, because it was a question of, are they going to amend Section 27, or are we looking at a complete new legislation for the ASSAm sector? So currently, where we are, it's with the MPRDA amendments. Also, from the university side, we do work with minors on the ground, and I would also say that engagement with the government has improved. So there is that movement.
There is progress. There is progress in that regard. No, but thanks. Thank you very much for that. Do you want to come in, maybe, Hanri, if just to add on this?
I think everything has been
You're
said.
fine. It's been said on this. Yeah, Gary?
Nothing really from my side to add.
Nothing from this side, yeah. Yeah, there is a very, very interesting question here that comes from Rosalind Morris, also on the chat. It goes beyond saying, what do we learn from our neighboring countries? It's a slightly different question. It's more nuanced than that. But let me just read the full text. So, given that the South African minerals industry was built on a system of migrant labor that extended into the neighboring countries, and given that a significant percentage of illegal miners come from those same countries where currency collapse, unemployment, and widespread poverty are even worse than in South Africa, what can be done to integrate a regulatory approach to small-scale artisanal mining in South Africa with a broader regional approach to the problem? It would seem that at both the level of economic drivers and at the level of the criminal syndicates that prey on the immiserated, there is a need, or there is need for a regional or international address to the issues. What are the organizations or bodies with whom South African entities could work? So this is taking more a regional integration of some kind, rather than saying, how do we learn from those around us? So it's a bit more involved than the earlier question. Who would respond to that? And of course, it has a place in the discussion.
Can I have a shot at that, Prof?
Yes, please, Grant, come in.
Yeah, there's an organization called MIASA, which is all the SADC region, all the ministers are part of it, and it has a structure. It is linked to the Minerals Council, and that would be the right platform to use to look. And I know that they have been looking at this artisanal mining issue, So that would be the ideal. Vusi Mabena is the sort of executive chair who runs it. That would be the right platform, I think. Thanks.
And MIASA, it's called MIASA, you said.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Grant, for that. Any other input from the panel in terms of potential regional integration? But thank you very much for that. Any other question that I might have left, Tebogo, on your side, that I might have just missed?
Hello, Prof.
Yes, it's possible that I'm missing
Other
some other
comments
questions.
and questions, yes, are in the chat box. I'm not sure if you're able to access
Yes,
the chat box.
there are quite a few of them. Yeah, so can you assist me with those?
Yes, let me just see
Please, just
where
assist me with those. Yeah,
it starts
I'm training to see.
from.
Yeah.
I think the first comment was from Vidette. And the question is on formalization of ASSAf, that it has failed in many instances across Southern Africa for multiple reasons, including a lack of adequate support.
No. That's what we've dealt with, Tebogo.
Dealt with. Oh,
We've
okay.
dealt with one, yeah.
All right. Let me see from my
There is a question from Vicky Hussein. If you
Vicky
can assist me with that. Yeah.
yes,
You can read that one for me.
Where is it? Okay, question is, it's also on ASSAf. That is an endemic in most African contexts, including in the DRC, Copper Belt, where statistically ASSAf is closely attached to 2 million's community survival. To what extent can a livelihood-centered framework serve as a legally enforceable benchmark for assessing the socio-economic and environmental performance of ASSAf? Do we have a benchmark, any measure in our system thinking or in the robust pathway towards ground-up governance?
Okay. I'll start off with you here, Ponzo. Hear what your view is before I go to the other panelists.
Thank you, Prof. Sure. So I know several studies have been conducted to look at to quantify the contribution of ASSAf, to livelihood, to socioeconomic development, because it has been, part of building a case for the sector. And on our side, specifically some of the research that, we have done, in that space was to look at the change in living standard measure, as an indicator of, development or, a progress. So looking at, where the miners, how they measured before they entered the sector, and where they are now, using LSM study. And so we had 3 case studies looking at diamond in Kimberley, coal in Emelo, and gold. So from that research, we're able to see the impact that the sector has on livelihood, in particular with coal and gold. We saw that shift from mostly LSM3 to LSM5, which indicated that really this sector is improving livelihoods amongst those that participate in it. But with diamond, the results that came out of the study did not see much movement. And this came to understanding the 3 sectors. With coal, you mine every day, and you generate revenue, making income every day. And with diamonds, as I said, you can get that diamond and make a lot of money, or you can spend 3-6 months, up to a year, not finding a diamond, and those that do find diamonds, there's issues of poor financial planning and all of that. So yeah, going back to this question, yeah, it's part of the research that we are doing, just to provide evidence that the sector contributes to livelihood, and using living standard measure was a framework that we used.
Thanks, sponsor, for that. Yeah, in fact, I see that this hinges very much on what is happening in your space. From the other panelists on this, any input? I see that one of the students, as invited by Prof Mostert, has responded, and that is Tomukudza Mutimba Sekwa. But before I go to Tomukudza, any input on the previous point? But thanks, sponsor, for that. I think that was very, very, very apt indeed to the question. Here is a response from one of the students to the question that we asked earlier. At Prof Hanri's invitation, I'll point out that lessons from other countries such as Ghana and the DRC are that first, licensing and compliance mechanisms alone are inadequate to stem the tide of illegal artisanal mining. This is compounded by the narrative of illegality, which in itself encourages a particular type of response, that being a punitive response. More significant progress seems to lie in solutions that target the socio-economic pressures of would-be participants in illegal mining. That's the answer. Along the lines of what we've heard briefly from Prof Mostert, I think the student will get a distinction, Prof Mostert.
You already he's one of these class of 2025.
Class of 25. Okay, no, that's great, colleagues. But then there's another question which I think this is one issue that we haven't touched on. Simple question: is there an AU position on this matter?
Can I come in, Prof?
Yeah, if we can come in.
Yes, there is. As I said, ASSAf. So on the continent, like I said, it's an activity that is taking place, globally, and there's a number of countries, on the continent with, large numbers, more than what we see, in South Africa. I think the DRC is one, Tanzania is one, Zimbabwe is another one. And from the information that I have, the gold production from Zimbabwe it's coming out of ASSAm operations. So on the continents, there's the Africa Mining Vision, which recognizes ASSAm. So ASSAm is one of the tenets of the Africa Mining Vision. And through that, they urge countries to formalize, to support the sector. And also the AMV is always supported by the AMGF, African Minerals Governance, frameworks, to guide countries on formalization. So it definitely does have a position on ASSAm, and it does support, ASSAm as a vehicle to support broad-based, socioeconomic development. And South Africa is a signatory, to the AMV, and so there is a working, relationship between, South Africa and, AU through the AMDC, African Minerals Development Center.
Okay, no, thank you very much for this. Because I think this could be one area where Africa works in unison, because the problems that are experienced tend to be very common among the different countries. Of course, they would have to also be underpinned by the various legal frameworks in those countries. But this is one area where I think there could be a common voice among different countries on the continent. Any other question that I might have missed? Sorry, Tebogo?
Well, I can point out to one from Bongani Jonas. I think it's a comment and say that we need to push for the MPRDA bill amendments. And I think that was mentioned earlier with regards to that. But then there's a question from Kyle in saying that, is there something to be said for slowly capturing parts of the value chain, which was spoken about earlier? For instance, Nigeria has provided buying centers for artisanal and small-scale miners that are not necessarily accommodated by legislation. Could it possibly help to dismantle established power structures by providing more competitive offers prior to large-scale legislative intervention?
Right. Who among the panel would take that one? We are now coming to a close of our conversation, but we still have a few minutes. Who can take that one?
I can just say that
Please come in, Hanri.
Kyle is also a current student
Yes.
of the master's program, and I can see that his assignment with Nigeria paid off. What is really good to see is thinking outside of the box. That's happening here is how do we interrupt a particular flow, and there's definitely space for looking at this more closely and seeing how this can help us learn to apply it to our current conundrum in South Africa.
But thanks for that, Hanri. Any other comment on this particular issue, Ponzo? I see you unmuting.
Just a short addition on this, Prof. Access to market remains a challenge in the sector. And as I noted, in the absence of support, in the absence of these avenues that miners can sell their minerals to, it obviously opens up, these challenges that we are seeing in the sector. So there's definitely lessons that we can extract in other countries. An example cited there is buying centers established in Nigeria. And I know in the case of Zimbabwe, they sell their gold to government, I think, Fidelity. Yeah. So those are avenues that can be looked at in the South African context, but obviously it will require resources, and it will need to be a multi, stakeholder intervention.
Okay, but thank you very much for that, Dr. Twala. There's just one question that is a burning question for me, and this one is for you, Gary. Which could be the last question, perhaps, if there are no further questions and answers. Is it? Yeah, please, Tebogo.
I sent you a message. He had to step off the platform. Sorry about that.
Who has to step off the platform?
Gary.
Oh, Gary. Oh, Gary has stepped off the platform. Okay, yeah, there was a question that was specific to the South African Institute of Mining and Metallurgy in terms of credentialing or creating micro-credentials that would make the pathway into entry much easier into that sector. It's very much a question along the lines of the SAIMM as to what could happen. But it's a question that might also apply to those or colleagues, the panelists in the academic sector. Have you ever thought of micro-credentials, perhaps? Do they have a place whatsoever to enable people to have easy entry into the formal mining sector without having to go to a university, for example? Is there an avenue for that, for micro-credentials? Yeah, Bonzo or Hanri on this one?
It's a good question that you are raising, Prof. And however, it's something that we are yet to look at.
Yeah, because I'm not sure whether the barriers have been somehow reduced at all levels, even on the academic side, to make sure that we equip people with the right skills to enter into that space. Hanri, just the parting shot.
Yeah, there's infrastructure for it at UCT. We have a professional development leg called Law at Work that does that kind of training and credentialing getting professional certificates. That's definitely something one can look into.
Indeed. Okay. Now, I would like you, please, to give me the closing remarks, 1 or 2 words in closing. I'll start off with you, Grant, please. Closing remarks.
Yeah, I was just going to respond to the credentials.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah, please start with that and then
very quickly. We had a program with the JSC on, we called it a junior mining accelerator, and some of our very smaller junior miners who were just coming into the market went through that program and it was very successful. So that was just an issue of capacity building there. My closing remarks is I think, despite the comment that it's academics talking, I still think these are very valuable discussions. Discussions been had before, but out of this, you get ideas, thinking outside the box, as somebody mentioned, and those ideas can then eventually find their way into policy and into practical implementation. So thank you for inviting me, and I think it's been a useful discussion.
Thanks, Grant. Really appreciate those comments. Ponzo, your parting line.
Also to continue on that train, Prof, to just thank you and the team for the opportunity to contribute to these discussions. And I agree with Grant. Yes, we do recognize, the core stakeholders that need to be part of the discussions, but as discussed, as unpacked in these sessions, issues within the sector are multifaceted. So the wider, the stakeholder, the better, and that will assist the sector a lot in terms of coming with practical ways, new ways of addressing these challenges. So I would also say education, and awareness, is important. And, that is something that we as, academia, obviously working with other institutions, can lead, because what I have realized, or what we've realized from our side, is there's still a lot of misconceptions, there's still a lot of misinformation about the sector, and that really has a bearing on how the sector is viewed and how the sector is treated. So to all the stakeholders, let's continue to educate each other about what the sector is and what the sector is not. Thank you, Prof.
Thanks, sponsor, for that. Maybe just you also, Hanri, your closing remarks.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll be very brief.
Yes.
You have made me think more about how the state engages with informality, not only in the mining sector, but much more broadly in other sectors and across regions and across national borders. And we can draw all kinds of lessons from other jurisdictions. We can't necessarily transplant models. But I think our task is to design a system for mining in which legality is not just available, but it is credible, it's visible, and it is worth choosing. And if we do that, it will be pioneering. And if we get it right, even just a little bit, it will be revolutionary.
Thank you very much, Hanri, for that very insightful statement. I think that colleagues has been very rewarding, particularly for me as well, and I'm thinking all the members of the audience. learned a thing or two from this deliberation. This is just the beginning, perhaps, of a long discussion around this subject, because it is a topic that we need to bring ourselves much closer to going forward in the country for a number of reasons. And I think the panelists here articulated the problem in much better ways than I could ever do. So I really thank you, colleagues, for making time. I just want to thank a few people, thank the ASSAf colleagues who organized this panel, Tebogo, Litabo, Kuto, everyone that was involved, Henriette, for making time, firstly, and also putting everything together for us to have this platform to engage. Thank you, as always. You've always done this very well. I don't have enough words to thank the panelists who really put their time aside. I know these are all busy people. All the panelists that we have here are usually very busy people, because we always ask for experts in the field to come and assist us. So by that reality alone, these are people who are very engaged in what they do. But thank you for really putting your time aside and coming to engage with us. We really appreciate this. And even in future, if you come back and knock on your doors, you must come back and assist us in the deliberations. So with those words then, and I want to thank the audience, the colleagues that have come to participate in the audience. We had a number of people in the audience. At some point, I saw more than 80 people in the audience. I really thank you, everyone that has come to contribute, the questions that were asked, the comments that were made. I think we've all learned from that, and let's build on that going forward. At this point, I think I will close the roundtable. Thank you again. Cheers.